Hello, everyone. I'm writing this because I feel like my entire world just shattered and I don't know how to move forward. Maybe getting it all out will help, or maybe someone out there can relate. Let me give you some context first. My name's Tom. I'm 34, and I work as a trucker based out of Texas. It's not the easiest job being gone for weeks at a time, but it pays the bills and lets me provide a good life for my wife, Emma. She's 30, and we've been married for 5 years now. If you asked me a month ago, I would have told you our marriage was solid, hell, even thriving. We were talking about starting a family, buying a bigger place, and finally settling down for good. Emma and I had been discussing kids more seriously over the past few months. I was excited, really excited. We'd even started looking at baby names, talking about nurseries, and thinking about how life would change once we had a little one running around. I thought we were on the same page. I thought she was just as eager to take that next step as I was. Every time I hit the road, I'd picture coming home and seeing her with a pregnancy test in hand, smiling ear to ear, ready to start the next chapter of our lives. It was the kind of future I dreamed about while driving those long highways, staring out at endless miles of road. I trusted Emma completely. She had a bit of an inflated opinion of herself, I won't lie. And she always saw herself as the catch in our relationship, the one who could have had anyone but chose. I shrugged it off most of the time because I loved her and I figured a little confidence never hurt anyone. She was beautiful, charming, and smart, everything I thought I wanted in a partner. But looking back now, there were signs I ignored. The way she'd brush off my concerns when I'd call her from the road and ask how she was doing. The little lies about where she was or who she was with that I didn't think twice about at the time. I chalked it all up to harmless stuff, normal married life, right? I had no idea what was waiting for me when I came home early. So last week, I was on the road doing my usual long haul across Texas and Oklahoma. It was supposed to be a 10-day trip, nothing out of the ordinary. Emma and I had our usual routine when I was gone. Morning check-in calls, a few texts throughout the day, and a good night call before I hit the sack in my truck. Everything seemed fine. Then, out of nowhere, my truck broke down just outside of Amarillo. Some engine issue, something the mechanic said would take a couple of days to fix because they had to order parts. My dispatcher told me to hang tight, but instead of wasting time in some cheap motel, I figured I'd take the opportunity to do something special for Emma. Coming home early felt like the perfect surprise. I imagined how her face would light up when she saw me standing at the door, how we'd have a whole extra weekend together. We could go out, spend time planning for the future, hell, maybe even start trying for that baby we'd been talking about. I didn't tell her I was coming. I wanted it to be a surprise, something different from my usual I'll be home Friday routine. The thought of her excitement gave me this warm feeling inside, like I was doing something right in our marriage, something to remind her how much I missed her. On the way home, I stopped by her favorite flower shop and picked up a bouquet of red roses, the kind she always loved. I even splurged on a nice bottle of wine, thinking we'd have a quiet night in, just the two of us. I couldn't wait to walk through that door and sweep her off her feet. As I drove through the familiar roads leading home, I started thinking about all the little things I missed while I was gone. The way Emma laughed at dumb reality TV shows, the way she'd sit on the porch drinking her morning coffee, waiting for me to call. I even started reminiscing about the times we'd stay up late just talking about life, about our plans, about how everything felt like it was falling into place. It felt good. Better than good. I was happy. But looking back now, I should have known. I should have felt that something was off. I pushed the thought away and focused on the excitement of seeing her again, holding on to the idea that maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of something even better for us. I was almost home, almost, and I had no idea what was waiting for me. I was about 10 minutes away from home when I started feeling that familiar excitement building up inside me. It's the kind of feeling you get when you've been away too long and all you want is to be back in your own space, with your own things, and most importantly, with the person you love. I imagined Emma sitting on the couch, maybe scrolling through her phone or watching one of those reality shows she's always obsessed with. I pictured walking in, surprising her with the flowers and wine and the way she'd light up when she saw me. But then as I turned onto our street, something made my stomach tighten. There was a car parked in our driveway, a black sedan, sleek, expensive looking, and completely unfamiliar. I slowed the truck down, staring at it as I pulled up to the curb. At first, I told myself it was nothing. Maybe it was one of Emma's friends or her sister Megan stopping by unannounced. But the more I looked at it, the more I realized something felt off. Emma usually let me know when people were coming over, especially if it was family. She knew I liked to be in the loop, and she had always been good about texting me whenever someone was staying over, even for a few hours. But there had been no texts, no messages. I sat there for a moment, the truck idling as I stared at the car, trying to push the unease out of my head. Maybe she had some work friend over. Maybe it was a delivery guy or a repair service I forgot about. But deep down, my gut was already sending me warning signs. Still, I shook it off. I wasn't going to be one of those guys, jumping to conclusions, overthinking everything. I trusted Emma. We were solid. We were planning a family. We were happy, right? I killed the engine and grabbed the flowers and the bottle of wine from the passenger seat. My hands felt a little clammy, but I blamed it on the long drive. I took a deep breath and stepped out of the truck, walking slowly up the driveway. The house looked the same. Our front porch light flickered slightly the way it always did when the wind picked up, and the wreath Emma put on the door last fall was still hanging there. Everything about it screamed home, but for some reason, I felt like a stranger standing in my own driveway. As I walked closer to the door, my mind started racing. I thought about all those times I called Emma late at night from the road, how sometimes she sounded distracted or in a hurry to get off the phone, but how lately she'd been sending shorter texts, not asking as many questions about my trip like she used to. I shook my head. No, don't do this to yourself, man. Don't ruin the surprise. But the car was still there, sitting in my driveway like it belonged, and the more I thought about it, the more I realized how little I actually knew about what Emma did when I was away. Standing at the front door, I hesitated. The flowers felt heavier in my hand now. I reached for the doorknob, took another deep breath, and told myself I was being ridiculous. But deep down, I wasn't so sure anymore. I stood there at the front door for what felt like forever, just staring at it. My heart was pounding in my chest, and my grip on the flowers tightened. 1,000 thoughts raced through my head, each one louder than the last. You're overthinking it. She's probably just having a friend over. Everything's fine. But I couldn't shake that feeling. The one that gnawed at my gut and made my palms. The black sedan in the driveway didn't belong there, and the more I thought about it, the more I realized I'd never seen Emma mention anything about someone coming over. I pushed the thought aside and finally turned the doorknob. The door swung open smoothly, and I stepped inside, expecting to hear Emma call out from the living room, but the house was quiet. Too quiet. No music playing, no dishes clinking in the kitchen, just silence. That wasn't normal. Emma always had some kind of background noise going, whether it was the TV, a podcast, or her favorite playlist. But now, nothing. I closed the door behind me, my footsteps sounding way too loud against the hardwood floors. The air inside smelled different too, faint, but there. A whiff of something musky and unfamiliar, mixed with the faint trace of Emma's vanilla-scented candles. I took a few steps forward, looking around. Everything looked the same, but it felt different. My eyes darted toward the kitchen. That's when I noticed it. 2 wine glasses sitting on the counter, both half full. I felt my stomach drop. I had bought wine on the way home, thinking it would be a special surprise, but Emma had already been drinking. Before I could even process that, I heard it. Laughter. Not just Emma's laugh, but a man's laugh. It was muffled, coming from upstairs, but it hit me like a punch to the gut. My feet felt rooted to the floor, my breathing shallow and uneven. I tried to think logically. Maybe it's just a friend, maybe it's nothing. But deep down, I already knew. The way the laughter drifted down from our bedroom, the way it sounded comfortable, familiar. It wasn't the kind of laugh you shared with just anyone. I set the flowers down on the counter, my hands shaking slightly. My whole body felt tense, like I was standing on the edge of something I couldn't come back from. I forced myself to move, to keep walking, my footsteps cautious and slow as I made my way toward the stairs. The closer I got, the clearer the voices became. I could hear Emma's soft giggle and then his voice, low, smooth, and way too comfortable for my liking. I stopped at the bottom of the stairs, staring up at the partially open bedroom door. For a second, I considered turning around, walking back out, pretending like I never came home early, but I couldn't. I had to know the truth, no matter how much it hurt. With each step up the stairs, my heart pounded louder in my chest, and my breathing felt heavier. I reached the top and took a deep breath. It was time to face whatever was waiting for me on the other side of that door. I stood outside our bedroom door, my heart hammering so hard I could hear it in my ears. The voices were clearer now. Emma's soft, playful laugh and the deeper, unfamiliar tone of a man's voice. They weren't talking loud, but there was a comfort in their exchange that sent a sick feeling twisting through my gut. I swallowed hard and reached for the doorknob, but I hesitated. My mind was racing, trying to come up with some rational explanation. Maybe it really was an old friend, someone she hadn't told me about because she thought it wasn't important. Maybe I was blowing this whole thing out of proportion. But then I caught another detail. Something small, but enough to make my stomach churn. Two plates sat on the coffee table downstairs, half-eaten food still on them. There was also a cologne scent in the air, one I didn't recognize. It was strong, musky, the kind of scent that didn't belong in my house. And then my eyes landed on something else in the hallway. Men's shoes. A pair of leather dress shoes neatly placed next to Emma's by the door. I clenched my jaw. I forced my feet to move, pushing open the bedroom door with enough force to make it creak. There she was, sitting on the bed, alone. Emma looked up at me with wide, startled eyes, her phone in her hand and a half-empty wine bottle on the nightstand. Her lips curled into an awkward smile, but I could see the panic behind it. "Tom, oh my God, you scared me," she said, tucking her hair behind her ear. "What are you doing home?" I took a step inside, scanning the room. It looked normal enough, except for the faint smell of men's cologne lingering in the air. My eyes landed on the two wine glasses sitting on the dresser, and I felt a lump rise in my throat. "I came home early," I said, my voice tight. "I held up the flowers and wine I'd bought. Wanted to surprise you." Her eyes flickered to the gifts in my hand, and for a split second I saw something in her expression. Guilt, maybe? But she covered it up quickly, standing up and walking toward me with that same forced smile. "That's so sweet, babe," she said, wrapping her arms around me. But I didn't hug her back. Instead, I stepped back, staring at her. "You didn't call or text. I would have cleaned up or something," she added with a nervous laugh. My eyes narrowed. "Who's here?" She blinked, her smile faltering for just a second. "What? No one. I cut her off. The car in the driveway. The extra wine glass. Who's here, Emma?" She paused, licking her lips before answering. "Oh, that. Yeah, an old friend from work dropped by." She glanced toward the window, avoiding my gaze. "They rented a car because their truck broke down, and I was just catching up with them. Nothing crazy." I nodded slowly, letting her words sink in. "Where are they now?" Emma hesitated just a little too long before saying, "Oh, they left about an hour ago. Had to run some errands, but they'll probably swing by later." I stared at her, my gut twisting into knots. I wanted to believe her. I really did. But everything inside me was screaming that something was off. I stepped past her, moving toward the closet, yanking it open without warning. Empty. I moved to the bathroom, checking inside. No one. She crossed her arms, giving me an indignant look. "Tom, seriously? You don't trust me?" I didn't answer right away. I just stood there, staring at her, trying to piece it all together. Part of me wanted to let it go, to take her word for it and move on. But the doubt was already there, gnawing away at me like a sickness. "Look, I get it," she said, her tone shifting to something softer, more manipulative. "If I didn't check for you and the whole house was full, what would you say, right, David?" "What?" "Have you been on the road? You're tired? Maybe you're just overthinking things?" I nodded, forcing a small smile, even though inside I knew something was wrong, and I was going to find out what. That night, I lay in bed next to Emma, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. Her explanation sounded too convenient, too rehearsed. An old friend dropping by, renting a car, leaving just before I got home. It didn't sit right with me. She fell asleep fast. Too fast, like she wanted to avoid any more questions. But I couldn't sleep. The smell of that unfamiliar cologne still lingered in the air, mixing with the faint scent of the flowers I'd brought home. I felt like a stranger in my own bed, in my own home. I kept replaying the details over and over in my head. The wine glasses, the food left on the plates, the dress shoes by the door, and the worst part, that voice I heard, the man's laughter. It wasn't just some casual friend stopping by. I knew it. The next morning, I woke up groggy after barely getting any sleep. Emma was already up, dressed, and on the phone when I walked into the kitchen. She quickly ended the call the second she saw me. "Morning, babe," she said, flashing me that too-perfect smile as she sipped her coffee. "You slept in late?" I nodded, watching her carefully. "Who were you talking to?" I asked, keeping my voice casual. She hesitated, just for a fraction of a second. Just Megan. She wanted to grab lunch later." I nodded, but my gut was telling me otherwise. Emma was a smooth liar, I'd give her that, but I knew her better than she thought I did. There was a tightness in her voice, a little too much effort in her smile. Throughout the day, I noticed more things that didn't sit right. She kept checking her phone, smiling at messages, and then quickly tucking it away when I walked into the room. When I asked what was so funny, she'd just say, "Oh, it's nothing," or "work stuff." Then there were the late nights. She'd been working late more often, and now, with me home unexpectedly, she suddenly had extra meetings and deadlines to meet. I wanted to believe her. I really did. But I couldn't ignore the growing suspicion gnawing at me. I tried to brush it off, tried to convince myself I was overthinking things. Maybe I'd been away too long and was just feeling insecure. Maybe I was making something out of nothing. But the next night, something happened that I couldn't ignore. I woke up around 2 a.m. to get a glass of water and found Emma in the living room, whispering into her phone. When she saw me standing there, she jumped and ended the call immediately. Jesus, Tom, you scared me, she said, clutching her chest. Who were you talking to? I asked, my voice calmer than I felt. She rolled her eyes and gave me an annoyed look. It was Megan again. She's going through some stuff. I just nodded, not wanting to start a fight right then and there, but I saw the way she avoided eye contact, the way her hands fidgeted with the hem of her shirt. She was lying. I knew it. And at that moment, I realized I couldn't ignore it anymore. I had to know the truth. For the next few days, I felt like I was living in someone else's life. I kept going through the motions, eating breakfast, running errands, acting normal, but inside I was a mess. Every time I looked at Emma, I felt this knot in my chest, this burning question I was too afraid to ask. I wanted to believe her. I needed to believe her. After all, we had plans, a future we'd been building together. How could it all just fall apart like this? I found myself staring at her more than usual, searching for something, some clue, some sign that she wasn't who I thought she was. Every time she laughed, every time she casually touched my arm, I couldn't help but wonder if it was all an act. Was she pretending? Was I imagining things? At night, I'd lie awake next to her, staring at the ceiling while she slept peacefully beside me. I thought about the conversations we'd had about having kids, buying a bigger house, building a life. I kept asking myself, was any of it real? I wanted to confront her, demand the truth, lay it all out on the table, but every time I opened my mouth, the words stuck in my throat. What if I was wrong? But deep down, I knew better. The little things kept adding up. The phone call she took outside, the sudden business meetings, the way she always seemed distracted when I talked to her. One night, I finally decided to test the waters. We were sitting on the couch, watching some movie neither of us really cared about. She was scrolling through her phone, laughing at something, and I asked, "So, that friend who came by the other day, the one with the rental car, what was their name again?" She froze for just a second, just long enough for me to catch it, before she plastered on that fake smile. "Oh, it was Jessica. You remember Jess, right?" I nodded slowly. I did remember Jess. And I also remember that Jess lived 2 states away. I didn't say anything else, just watched her closely as she kept scrolling, pretending everything was fine. But in that moment, I knew. The thought of confronting her made my stomach turn. I wasn't ready. Not yet. I needed more than gut feelings and half-truths. I needed proof. And that's when I decided I wasn't going to sit around waiting for answers anymore. I was going to find out the truth, no matter how much it hurt. After days of tormenting myself with questions and doubts, I finally decided I needed to put an end to it, once and for all. I couldn't keep living in this limbo, wondering if my wife was lying to me every time she looked me in the eye. I decided to come home early from my next short haul without telling Emma. It was the only way I could get the answers I needed. Before I left, I made sure to act completely normal, maybe even a little more affectionate than usual. I kissed her goodbye, told her I'd call when I got to my stop, and left like nothing was wrong. Inside, though, I was sick to my stomach. Driving away from the house, I kept replaying everything over and over in my head. The late night phone calls, the mysterious car, the hesitation in her answers. I could feel it in my bones. Something wasn't right. Halfway through my route, I faked an issue with my truck and told my dispatcher I needed to turn back for repairs. They weren't happy, but they didn't argue. After all, trucks break down all the time, and it wasn't unusual. As I drove back home, my mind raced with every possible scenario. But maybe I'd walk in and find nothing out of the ordinary. Maybe it was all in my head, but deep down, I knew better. The closer I got to the house, the more my hands started sweating against the steering wheel. My heart pounded in my chest as I pulled into the neighborhood. And there it was again, the black sedan, parked right in my driveway. I gritted my teeth, gripping the wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. It wasn't a coincidence. No more excuses. No more doubts. I pulled around the corner and parked down the street, out of sight. I sat there for a few minutes, breathing heavily, staring at the house I had built with Emma, the house where I thought we were building a future together. Finally, I got out of the truck, moving carefully toward the house. My footsteps felt heavy, but my mind was clear now. No more hoping, no more assuming. I was about to find out the truth, and I was ready for it. I crept up the front steps, pressing my ear to the door for a second. The faint sound of laughter drifted from inside. His laughter. That same low, smug laugh I'd heard the first time I came home early. My blood boiled. Taking a deep breath, I gripped the doorknob, steadying myself. I pushed the door open slowly, stepping inside, my heart racing faster than it ever had before. I was ready to face whatever was waiting for me on the other side of that door. I stepped into the house, careful not to make a sound. The air felt thick, heavy with something I couldn't quite put into words. Betrayal, maybe. The lights were dim, and the faint hum of music drifted from upstairs. And then I heard it. Laughter. Hers and his. My grip on the bouquet of flowers tightened until the stems crumpled in my hand. I moved slowly, my boots making soft creaks against the hardwood floors as I made my way up the stairs. Just every step felt like I was walking toward the end of something I had spent years trying to build. When I reached the top of the stairs, I saw the bedroom door slightly ajar, the soft glow of the bedside lamp spilling into the hallway. I pushed the door open without hesitation, and there they were, Emma lying in bed, the sheets barely covering her, and him, a man I didn't recognize, sitting up beside her, scrambling to pull the covers over his bare chest. He looked like he'd seen a ghost. Emma's eyes went wide, and for a moment the room was silent. Then she screamed, "Tatum, what are you doing here?" I didn't say a word. I just stood there, letting the weight of the moment sink in. The bouquet of roses slipped from my hand and hit the floor with a dull thud, petals scattering across the carpet. Her lover, some guy with perfectly styled hair and a panicked look in his eyes, fumbled to cover himself with the blanket. "Man, I didn't know," he stammered, but I held up a hand, shutting him up instantly. Emma scrambled to sit up, reaching for me, but I took a step back. I can explain," she said, tears already welling up in her eyes. "It's not what it looks like." I let out a bitter laugh. "Not what it looks like?" I gestured to the scene in front of me. "It looks pretty damn clear to me, Emma." Her face crumpled and she started sobbing, pulling the sheets tighter around herself, like that would somehow hide the truth. I never meant for this to happen. I felt like I was outside of my own body, watching this scene play out like it was someone else's life, not mine. The hurt was there, sure, but more than that, I felt numb. I looked at the guy, Tom or Mike or whoever the hell he was, and then back at Emma. "You have until tomorrow to get your things and get out," I said, my voice colder than I'd ever heard it. "I'll send the divorce papers to your work." Emma gasped, her hands trembling. "Please, Tom, we can fix this. We can talk about it." I shook my head. "No, Emma. You already made your choice." Without another word, I turned and walked out, leaving them frozen in that moment of betrayal. Downstairs, I collapsed onto the couch, my head in my hands, the reality of it all crashing down on me like a ton of bricks. My chest felt tight, my breathing shallow. I don't know how long I sat there, staring at nothing, before exhaustion finally took over and I fell asleep right there. When I woke up, it was the middle of the night. The house was eerily quiet. I went back upstairs, half expecting them to still be there, but the room was empty now. Just me and the ghost of what used to be my marriage. I crawled into bed, fully clothed, staring at the ceiling for hours, wondering how the hell I got here. The next morning, I woke up with a splitting headache and a heaviness in my chest that I couldn't shake. The events of last night came flooding back the second I opened my eyes. For a moment, I hoped it had all been a nightmare, some cruel trick my mind had played on me after too many weeks on the road. But then I saw the crushed bouquet of roses still lying on the floor, petals scattered everywhere like a crime scene, and I knew it was all real. I sat up, rubbing my face, feeling drained in a way I'd never experienced before. The house was silent. Emma was gone. I didn't know if she'd left for good or just ran off to avoid facing me, but I didn't care. Walking downstairs felt like walking through a home that no longer belonged to me. The pictures on the walls, the little decorations Emma had picked out over the years, they all felt like reminders of something fake, something that no longer had any meaning. I thought about everything we had built together. The late nights talking about our future, the plans for kids, the dreams of growing old side by side, and now it was all just... I found myself sitting at the kitchen table, staring at nothing, feeling completely lost. I wanted to be angry, to rage, to break something, but instead all I felt was emptiness. I picked up my phone and scrolled through my messages with Emma. They seemed so normal, so loving, like she was just as excited about our future as I was. It made me sick to my stomach, knowing that all the while she was sneaking around behind my back, lying straight to my face. After a long pause, I typed out a text. "I want you gone by the time I get back tonight. Don't make this harder than it already is." I hit send and tossed my phone on the table, feeling the weight of finality settle over me. I couldn't stay in this house anymore, not right now. I needed to clear my head, so I grabbed my keys and drove around aimlessly, not even knowing where I was going. My chest felt tight, my breathing shallow. I pulled over into an empty parking lot and just sat there for a while, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. The shock was wearing off, and in its place, the pain was settling in. I had loved Emma with everything I had. I had given her my trust, my loyalty, my life, and she threw it all away like it meant nothing. So if you're reading this and you're going through something similar, just know you'll get through it. It hurts like hell, but one day you'll wake up and it won't hurt quite as much. And eventually you'll realize that losing someone who didn't value you isn't the worst thing in the world. It's actually the beginning of something better. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Tell me what you think about that story. Have a good day and bye.